Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Nuclear Copper, the secret world of nuclear policing. It's a true story that delves into the fascinating and covert war of policing in a nuclear policing, as seen through the eyes of PC Okuhara. I'm delighted to say that joining me live from Japan is the author of Nuclear Copper, and it's Mac Okuhara. Mac, good morning to you. Good morning from us. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. You're in, whereabouts are you, by the way? In Japan, I believe.
In Japan, Matsumoto. So I was right in the middle of the main island where all the mountains are.
So tell me a little bit about then your background before we get into the book itself. What are you doing in Japan? You don't sound like with the greatest respect, you don't seem like you were born in Kyoto. So whereabouts? What's your story, Matt? Please.
Well, I'm originally from the UK. So as you can tell by the accent, from the southwest in the UK, and I learned Japanese as a hobby and eventually ended up moving to Japan. So that's the reason why I'm in Japan. And now in Japan, I'm a university lecturer, and I also do translations for martial arts display team. Live translations when they do their demonstrations.
Live translations during demonstrations for martial art. That must be a challenge.
It's good fun. It's okay doing it Japanese to English. The other way around, that's hard.
I can imagine. So tell me a little bit about then nuclear policing. I hadn't really thought about this. So explain a little bit of the premise and what gave you the idea for the book.
Well, I'm a big fan of narrative non-fiction books, whether it's military or police matters. I enjoy that style of book. As related to nuclear policing, there's in the UK, there are several police forces that are dedicated to specific industries. So you've got the British Transport Police who deal with the railways and railway property. You've got the Ministry of Defence Police, Ministry of Defence Properties. You've even got port polices who deal with ports. And then they've got the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, which I was a part of, and they look after civil nuclear assets in the UK and abroad.
So how do you get into this particular area of policing then? And what attracted you to get into this particular area, Matt?
Well, that's quite an interesting anecdote, really, about how I got into it. But how you get into there in the first place is just like joining any other constabulary. When they're recruiting, you can go on their website or catch an advert in a magazine and join. However, I was initially hoping to join Gloucestershire Constabulary, where I'm from, Gloucester. And I was randomly deselected with 170 other applicants who are all of exactly the same ethnicity. And Gloucestershire Constabulary actually found to have breached the Equality Act by randomly deselecting people of a certain gender and a race.
Right.
So they were all deselected. But my application, which was successful, was transferred to the Civil Nuclear Constabulary instead.
Oh, right. Okay. So that touches several bases at the same time. Now, what is presumably, I mean, if you're Port Police or British Transport Police, that's a specialisation or protecting MOD property, but protecting, presumably explain to me as a layperson who knows nothing about anything, Matt, as you can probably tell. But so are you the person, are you patrolling the outside of, for example, a power station? Are you alongside a train, riding on a train that takes nuclear waste? I mean, what's the basic sort of premise of what nuclear policing is about?
Well, all of the above.
Right.
So if it's a nuclear power station, if it's generating and it's got fuel, there's going to be armed police there, a decent number. They patrol inside the site. They patrol outside the site up to a certain distance to disrupt any sort of illegal activity or detect hostile reconnaissance and such. And then there are other sites which are much, much larger than power stations, such as Sellafield. I mean, Sellafield, which is in Cumbria, it's got 40 miles of roads and, 10,000 workers. And a train station. So, yeah, they police all of that. And then when there's fuel in movement, in transit as well, an escort is sent with the fuel.
And presumably, because this is such an emotive subject, I mean, you say, I like the way you say, if there's sort of disturbance outside, because, I grew up, and, I'm a little bit older than you, Matt, but I grew up during the 80s, and it was great. It was obviously nuclear power was a very, pardon the pun, a very hot subject. But there were protests. They were not only against nuclear missiles, but also about nuclear power. Nine Danker, of course, happening in the former West Germany. It was seen as something, and so there would be protests. So, back in that you have, I suppose there are two levels of this. You have the people who will stand out, mainly sort of trying to disrupt or make their point peacefully with placards and whatever. That's number one that you deal with. And then, of course, you have a more insidious threat, which is from people who want to do wrong or obtain these materials for their own nefarious needs.
That's right, yeah. So if it was a general policing matter, such as protesters, for example, normally the civil nuclear constabulary response would be minimal and holding on to its armed response capability on site just in case a terrorist attack would follow up at any time. It would be handed off to the county constabulary as soon as possible. So take, for example, where I worked in, Hinkley Point, because Hinkley Point's being built right now. If there were protests, and there have been, Avon and Somerset Police would send their people to deal with the peaceful protesters because they've got a right to do it. Okay, it's the civil nuclear constabulary being a heavily armed constabulary, in fact, the most heavily armed constabulary in the UK, they would police it, monitor it, and if they were required, they'd get involved with it, but they'd be keeping their resources back for, like I said, the more insidious, the more nefarious attacker that may be looking to disrupt the critical infrastructure of the UK.
So it's very much a question that if we see policing at a nuclear site, it tends to be, if it makes the news, it'll be something like that. So that will be a local constabulary rather than your lot. Now, you just mentioned a few things, heavily armed, quick responses, very heavily armed, and also presumably there's the unarmed bit as well. So this, from trying to get into Gloucester Constabulary, this must have been quite the deal, Gloucester Constabulary's loss was presumably sort of your gain, and it must have been very fascinating and taking you in terms of your level of policing to a whole new level. Explain to me a little bit about A, the training process, and B, what you were trained in, Matt.
Well, luckily, before joining the CNC, I was in the army. I did a stint in the army, and I went to Iraq with the army, so I was used to handling firearms and sort of patrolling in dangerous situations. And I suppose my ambition would have been to be a firearms officer at Gloucestershire at some point. But joining the CNC, you're a firearms officer straight away. Everyone is a firearms officer. To get into a non-firearms role, you mentioned non-firearms roles, you would have had to been in for a few years and look for specialization. For example, general training or detectives, for example. They're not necessarily required to carry guns, and neither are senior officers. But a good 95% of the constabulary carry out armed duties.
Right then. So, what is is there sort of a particular esprit de corps then? Because a lot of people will have left the army or the services and found that something's sort of lacking. Did you find that when you joined this particular branch of the police services, it was kind of, you got that same sort of feeling because you were specialised? There was a esprit de corps perhaps that you wouldn't get in other sort of units.
Yeah, there's kind of an esprit de corps. In policing, there's even the detectives, the ones who don't wear uniforms and the ones who do wear uniforms. They all both think they're better than each other. And the cops who carry guns and the cops who don't carry guns, they think they're better than each other. So it's in the CNC, because everyone's pretty much the same. 95% are armed. We don't compare ourselves to each other, but comparing ourselves to other constabularies, there's a friendly rivalry. We train to the same level, but we have different responsibilities. The
thing with this particular responsibility as well is it's an international thing, isn't it? It's not just, obviously Britain has its nuclear power plants, but also France has its nuclear power plants. Everywhere's got its own. So how much information was shared, or just on a basic level, how much international cooperation is there amongst the various forces?
A lot of international cooperation. Yeah, quite a lot of international cooperation. We have the International Atomic Energy Authority, IAEA, and they are a UN part of the UN, and they basically oversee the nuclear industry as a whole all over the globe for any country which uses civil nuclear assets. And there's agreements in place that have to be met by the governments who want to use nuclear power. So the governments are generally talking to each other all the time, but British police officers and French police officers, the low-ranking bobbies on the ground, they're not talking to each other so much. But the senior officers and ministers certainly are.
When it comes to actually policing this, is this a proactive role or a reactive role? Because I would imagine because of the nature of the business, presumably this is a thing where at a higher level you get, I don't know, the MI is getting involved, So how much of the policing, in your opinion, is done by your particular branch of the police force, or is there a filter down from the various highest levels saying, look, there's been some suspicious activity from this particular group? How does that work in your experience, Matt?
Well, if there was a suspicious activity from a particular group, that would normally be handled over to the Civil Nuclear Constabulary's detectives, the special branch, to have a look at. The bobbies on the ground, the nuclear coppers, they'll be on patrol at the power stations, and they'll be carrying out a patrol strategy that's been agreed by the area commander, and that won't deviate, although it is reactive, it is flexible, and it can change. So if there is a threat to respond to or a need for enhanced security, the CNC will try to be ahead of the curve instead of being reactive. I mean, the last thing you want is anyone with a malicious intent to come anywhere near a power station. So we're trying to intercept that before it happens. If you're moving
stuff, there you go. That's my experience. If you're moving stuff, presumably that you're going to be using. You'll be working in collaboration with. Are the vehicles that will accompany the movement of materials? Is it your stuff? Is it high level sort of outriders from and drivers from other constabularies and armed unit response units? I mean, just talk me through a little bit about that, because that's going to be interesting for the listeners, how actually move.
Well, there's 3 ways to move nuclear fuel. You can do it by train, you can do it by ship, or you can do it by road vehicle. And we have done it once by air as well. When we did it by air, that was mostly handled by the Americans because it was their fuel. We were just giving it back to them. So they sent over one of their planes and they handled the security. We only had a minimal involvement. If you're doing it by ship, they're a specialist shipping company called Pacific Nuclear Transport. That's 51% owned by the UK government, 49% owned by other stakeholders. They have specialist cargo ships, which are almost like they're ATVs, armed transport vessels. So they're armed with a lot of equipment. And then on road and by train, you have specialist vehicles or carriages to contain the fuel. In fact, as a point of interest, they tested one of these flasks, they're called. That's what the fuel is moved in a flask, by hitting it with a speeding train, and the train came off worse than the flask.
Right.
So they're pretty substantial containers when we do move them in trains or lorries or ships.
How much prime preparation? Because it's not a point of, okay, it's Monday, we're going to leave in half an hour. Presumably this is a huge military-style operation that you rehearse for, you run through, you do all sorts of case scenarios months in advance, presumably, Matt.
Well, yeah. The escort department is a separate entity of the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, so it's a separate part. So you'd apply to join it, and I was on the Civil Nuclear on the CNC's escort department for quite a few years in the planning department, as it happens. So I got to do a lot of the operations. There is a capacity for short notice operations, although it's not preferred. It's just an out. This is the operation we're going to do. This is what we did last time. Let's do this again. But that's never happened, luckily. But an operation could take, up to a year to plan. And in certain instances, only a few hours to execute. So it's the planning covers a lot of contingencies, and it goes through a lot of training and a lot of rehearsals. And the officers on the escort team are all specially selected and trained for that role.
You mentioned the book, and you're based in Japan. Of course, there was, what is it now, over 10 years ago, the nuclear disaster. Presumably, there was their nuclear police had to deal with all sorts of contingencies that never even come into that. And do you transfer information so that, because if it all goes wrong, a nuclear accident doesn't respect people's borders, it'll just hit everywhere. And how good is transfer of that information? And were you contacted, for example, would other nuclear police be contacting that thing, because you're the guys who know how to deal with the specifics of the business?
Well, the CNC is the UK's entity for nuclear security, and the American Department of Energy, they've got their own part, and the national police in Japan, they have an equivalent of the CNC to deal with. If they want information from us, well, first of all, Japanese, as I can tell you, it's not an easy language to understand unless you've done it for quite a while. So it normally tends to go up to ministerial or government department level and then come back down when there's a query. But information sharing, like I said previously, is handled by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Authority, which is a component of the UN.
Presumably, if you're working in this, it's the qualities of being an officer working in this particular department is, you've just got to focus on the job in hand. So not to get too flustered, I suppose, especially when you're doing anything to do with this particular bit. But presumably it's the ability to work well under pressure, decisive thinking, and not to, and not to sort of, you've got to be cool under pressure, to put it mildly, in this particular sphere.
Yeah, I think that's still good qualities for a police officer in general. But with the civil nuclear constabulary, everyone is also a firearms officer initially.
Yeah.
So they're not just tested on how accurate they are when they're shooting or how skillful they are with the tactics. They're also looking at the strength of character of the recruit as they come in, to see whether they are actually suitable to be an officer and operate under the intense stress. Because in the CNC, a good day is when nothing happens. We have a lot of good days. We don't want anything at all to happen. But there have been occasions when the CNC have had to get involved with either general policing instance or security instance, and you have to be able to change from this person that was on guard duty, essentially, or on a simple patrol, straight into a response mode. Whereas the Home Office and county forces, they tend to be a lot busier and have tasks set for them for the entire day.
You see, that was going to be my next question. Was, what's the high point of the work? But in a role such as this, the high point of the work is a day when nothing happens, rather than. But there must be,
like you said.
Yeah, but there must be situations where, because otherwise it would get not monotonous, but do you know what I mean? There has to be. Presumably there has to be, is it the planning and execution perfectly of the of the removal of, or the transfer of nuclear materials from one space to the other? Is it a policing operation that goes, without a hitch? Is that the high point and makes a difference?
That's what you're aiming for. Of course, you're aiming for a perfect execution, which it never happens. Of course, there's always points that come up when we do a debriefing of an operation. But so long as the fuel gets from A to B without any problems, then that's a good operation. And if it's at a power station, if nothing happens, if there's no threat to the station, then that's a good day as well. How long
is the shift then? I mean, do you get weeks on, weeks off? How does it work? And is it sort of a 12-hour period? Yeah.
It's 4 on, 4 off. When I was in, certainly, I've been out for a few years now, but it was 4 on, 4 off for 12 hours. So you did 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12 hours on, 12 hours. Then you swap to night shift, 12 hours and 12 hours, and then you get your rest period. Provided there wasn't any overtime, of course, which there occasionally was.
Yeah. And does it breed? I mean, all forces have a humour. I mean, you were in the army, you knew what their humour is like. So is there a particular humour in, I'm not talking sort of Homer Simpson popping a rod down somebody's back when they're not looking, but I mean, is there a particular humour have you found in this particular?
Well, they say, it says things like, wouldn't you rather be a police officer instead of a nuclear police officer? Well, someone's got to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Well, I mean, when you write a book like this, presumably you need clearance. I mean, you can't be spilling out. And by the way, we keep it in that, yeah. Yeah, that must have been fun. I mean, when you said you're going to write this, did suddenly sort of alarm bells go off with your former colleagues and say, "Oi, Matt"?
No, actually, interestingly, I wrote the book and the manuscript, and I contacted the constabulary about a year before it went to publication, so a good 12 months before. And then the agent came back to me and said, "Oh, you didn't tell us about that." And I kept the email because I knew they'd say something like that. I said, "Hang on, you just wished me well last year. You said good luck with the memoir." So they've seen it and cleared it, yeah. But it's nothing useful in there if someone was looking to attack the UK.
Do you miss it? Was it part of your life, you felt like your army, like your service? Is it part of your life that you're glad that you did, but it's built you to make to where you are now, as it was?
I really enjoyed being in the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, but I speak Japanese, and I wanted to move to Japan, and I'd done just about everything I wanted to do. So yeah, I ended up putting an end to that chapter and starting a new adventure on the other side of the world.
So what are you hoping that people will take from Nuclear Copper then?
Well, I think it's quite an interesting read because it's something no one ever talks about. It says the secret world of nuclear policing. The only reason it's secret is because people don't know much about it. There is a Civil Nuclear Constabulary, and they do have specific operations, and it's interesting, and it's also, I think, possibly a good tool for people who are interested in looking into getting into the CNC, because it's a candid look at the kind of activities that the coppers get up to.
Because it's the thing, I'd never really thought about this, and then of course, obviously, you're not going to say, "Oh, Perkins, you can stop sort of walking around the streets of Portishead or whatever, and you're going to look after Sellafield." I mean, obviously, it makes sense.
Yeah. I hope it does. Like I said, I like narrative nonfiction books, and I tried to write it with a decent sense of humor as well. So if people are just want a good read, something that's entertaining, I've tried to keep it as entertaining and lighthearted, but also touching on the serious side of the nuclear policing. If
people want to follow you or find out more about you or the book and say nice things to you, Matt, where's the best? I mean, do you do social media? Is there an Instagram? Are you TikToking from Japan? I mean, where's the best place to find you?
All right. Well, if I'm TikToking from Japan, that's my samurai shooting thing. So if you speak Japanese, you can look me up on TikTok.
Your samurai shooting thing?
Yeah, we've got it's the martial arts team I just interpret for. They were armed with guns and samurai armor, but the guns were made in like the 1800s. So I work with them. Are we
talking muskets here then? Are we talking flint?
Yeah, basically a Japanese version of a musket, which is called a teppo. Whoa. So we use those. In fact, now that the cherry blossoms arise, this Sunday is the start of our shooting season. So if people are interested in that,
yes,
just find me.
You can tell I probably am. Yes, oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Where can we find you on that then?
That's Gun Samurai. So the word gun and the word samurai. So that's on every social media. And me personally, my writing account, because I'm trying to think of new ideas for other writing. So Nuclear Copper is just me, Matt Okuhara. Okuhara.
And you'll be able to order the book via our own virtual bookstore. Matt, I think I'm going to get you back on to talk about this samurai shooting at more thing, because that's just pinged all my little anorak buttons, as it were. But this book is called Nuclear Copper. You can order it via our website. It's The Secret World of Nuclear Policing. It's by Matt Okuhara. Matt, thank you so much. It's been fascinating to speak to you today.
Thank you very much for having me.